Welcome back to another episode of Boom or Bust, your home for NFL Draft Talk. I'm your host, Terry, and today the draft is over. We are doing a draft recap for the NFC East. Just a reminder, I do not do grades. Don't want to grade people that haven't played yet. Also, I don't know every team situation and all those different things, and it usually just turns into how many players did you get that I like. And this NFC East is one of the reasons I don't do this, because almost all of my favorite players are in the draft for the NFC East. So I would automatically be given really high grades just based off what I like. But I want to focus more on the players and kind of what I think about them and how they fit and all that good stuff. So let's kick it off with Dallas, and you're talking about a draft that I really like. Oh my God. Okay, so let's start off. Number one, you get Leighton Vander Esch, Boise State linebacker. I saw some people saying outside back. He never played outside, but that's not his role. He's a backer. Yes, he's a big guy. He's 250, about 6'4", but that doesn't make him an outside rusher. He's a straight linebacker, a true one too. Neck roll and everything. He can read and diagnose offenses and come downhill. He can play in coverage. He can blitz, even though I think he's an average blitzer, but still, and there's a lot of things that Vander Esch can do as a linebacker, and it's someone that I think is a great pick for Dallas. Your linebacking core has been up and down. Injuries has been really hurtful, but you're talking about putting Vander Esch with Jalen Smith as he continues to get healthy from his tragic injury. This guy gives you some more juice, and between those two, the Mike position has molded so far in the recent years, but I still think Vander Esch may be more of the traditional Mike than Jalen Smith. Either way, he's going to help you in both the run and pass. I think he's got a really great frame, and I think you watch his tape, you see a really smart, hard-working linebacker with a high motor, and I think it's a great pickup for Dallas. Now, number two, you pick up, it is so close between Connor Williams and McGlinchey for my favorite tackle. You see him move to guard, and that's the difference between him and McGlinchey. McGlinchey has all the length of a tackle, and Connor doesn't. So some people say he's a guard. And I see the Cowboys drafted him as a guard, which is fine. I still think you're going to kick the tires of him at right tackle, because the same thing happened with Lyle Collins from LSU, where he ended up kicking the tires at right tackle this year. And so I think between those two, you're going to figure out which combination you like at guard and tackle, and you're going to be good to go. Tyron Smith, you talking about Zach Martin, one of the top guards, Travis Frederick, one of the top centers, and then Connor Williams and Lyle Collins. Oh my God. Stop. Just stop. I love Connor Williams. And it was so cool to see, he never was a big football, he played football, but he never thought of himself as a NFL player as a Texas kid. And then he ends up going to Texas, the college he root for, and now going to Dallas. It's a special story. I think he's going to be, pretty good. People talk about him struggling this year. I didn't see it in the games that I watch. Hopefully as he continues to get more healthy from his injury, I think you got an absolute steal in the second round. And then you talk about Michael Gallup, one of my top receivers in the top 5. I think he's so underrated. Third round, though, is a little higher than some people expected. So Dallas obviously saw the potential. The only thing that I hesitate is that you don't got Dez. You got Terrence Williams, who's good, but he's not a true number one. I believe they brought in Allen Hurns, so either way, I thought Michael Gallup opposite a true alpha receiver would have been at his best, because then he'd get less attention. You don't have that in Dallas, but I still think Michael Gallup brings a whole bunch of solid qualities. What are you talking about? Route running. What are you talking about? Getting vertical. What are you talking about? His hands catch radius. All these different things. I think Michael Gallup plays hard. And I think this is a good place to go as Dak continues to kind of build his repertoire with his receivers. 4th round, Dorrance Armstrong. In a draft where edge rushers were scarce, it seemed like Armstrong would get pushed up, but he ended up falling. And he's got some tweener qualities to him, but he is a dog. I think he does go hard when he can. He's not scared of blocks. I think you get his motor running a little more hot. And then, of course, you got to refine his pass rush. His moves aren't that great, and I think you could really help him understand how to get off blocks more than just running into people. I wouldn't say he's DeMarcus Lawrence. And let me just say, I was huge on DeMarcus Lawrence when he came out, and now that he's flourishing, just let me put that on the mark. Oh, and Boise State, another connection with Lander Vader Ash. But anyway, he's not DeMarcus Lawrence, but he's almost similar where DeMarcus was not as big as he is now. He came in a little lanky, had to put on weight and really up his game, but he had more length and explosion than Dorrance does. But I think he could be a poor man's DeMarcus Lawrence. Dalton Schultz, love him. A lot of people thought that the Cowboys were end up going to get a tight end, and I forgot which round it was, but I think someone traded up right in front of them, and I don't think it was Dallas Goedert. It was one of the tight ends, and I was like, man, that kind of sucks. But then I think they either got Connor Williams or Mike Gallup, but either way, I thought it was a good move because you got tight ends throughout these drafts that are rated closely. And so Dalton Schultz, I think, has the highest ceiling as out of the blocking tight ends. I think he runs really, or at least he breaks down really well on his routes, but it's really rare that he was in the pass set at Stanford. But I think he's got tremendous potential as a receiver, and he has the heart and skills of a blocker. Doesn't have the strength, could get stronger, but I think he's going to be a nice combo as they try to replace Witten. And then Mike White, one of my favorite quarterbacks coming into the year, changed systems at at Western Kentucky, and it did not fit him at all. But I thought last year had some of the best accuracy I ever saw. This year, not so much, but then he go to Senior Bowl and you saw it again where he was really head and shoulders above a lot of the quarterbacks and end up starting. Chris Covington out of Indiana. There's a couple guys out of Indiana, these linebackers, T-Girl Scales, who I don't even think got drafted, but he's an interesting pick. Don't know a whole bunch about him, but I think those guys have a real limit, but in the 6th round, not too bad. Cedric Wilson in the 6th round is crazy. He really, I thought, did really well at the Senior Bowl, and then you watch his tape. He's not a burner, but he gets down the field, man. I think he finds a way to get open. So, Cedric Wilson, not sure why he fell. I think he was in a clump of receivers that were just as good as each other. And that's a really interesting pick. So I think with Wilson and Gallup, you really got some high potential out of those two. And then Bo Scarborough, one of my favorite backs. Reminds me of Derrick Henry. The injury history, unfortunately, made him fall. But Bo, and behind this line with Zeke, oh man, Dallas has a draft that just kind of mesmerizes me to get him in the 7th. So, hats off to Dallas, man. To be honest with you, I mean, it's not a slam dunk with these receivers, which is probably the biggest glaring need to a lot of fans. But I still think you got some real top-notch prospects that could end up doing something for you. No corners on here or anything. I still don't believe that much in Dallas secondary, but I can't be mad at what they did. I really like these picks. Let's move on to Philadelphia. Super Bowl champions, Philadelphia Eagles. Give them respect. So, talking about Dallas Goedert, he ends up going to, I was right. Okay, he was the pick right before the Cowboys. And I was like, man, the Eagles stole their player, and maybe they wanted Connor all along, but I think Connor's the right choice. So Dallas ends up going after the Eagles trade back. And again, they won a Super Bowl, but they got a really stacked roster. Not too many holes, so trading back was fine. You get Dallas. And interesting, a lot of people are happy with that. I mean, you got Zach Ertz, so that's one thing. Dallas, I think he's similar, but he can't block. Like, Zach Ertz came from Stanford, like I talk about Dalton Schultz. Stanford, you gotta block. You gotta go heavy run game. So even though Zach Ertz has become more of a passing target, he knows how to block. Dallas doesn't have that, so it'll be interesting to see how they use him. Avonte Maddox, honestly, was surprised. Haven't really heard of him. Josh Sweat falling because of the medicals in the knee. On the edge, I think Philly's a good place. Philly's a good place. They really want to get up the field. I mean, they'll never forget Brandon Graham and that sack on Brady to win the Super Bowl. So they're always going to probably value edge rushers after that. Not edge rushers, but rushers in general. And so you think about Derek Barnett, which you got last year, and then we add in Josh Sweat, and then we got Graham, and we got Cox, and all these people. You can never have too many, man. You want that active attacking front four. Then you go down Matt Pryor, the other TCU tackle. Interesting pick. These last two, you got Lane Johnson, who is a stalwart, and he was a project. He was a former quarterback turned tight end, turned tackle over at Oklahoma, and he was definitely a project. And you got Jason Peters, which kind of was a project too. Former position player, became lineman. And so these guys are kind of in that mold, but, Lane Johnson was a top pick. Jason Peters wasn't a super high pick, but still not as low as 6 and 7 rounds. So it's tough to say that, they're in that mold, but, they want to take that path to becoming better linemen out of, molding a lump of clay. So Matt Pryor, okay. Jordan Mailata is the one to talk about. Rugby player. I'm a rugby player, 4 years. So I like it. Now, rugby does not translate to offensive line. As much as it's similar, because football came from rugby. It's a lot of things you can learn about the game of football from rugby, but blocking is not one of them, because you can't block in rugby. And so it should be interesting. Big guy. Now, the thing in rugby, though, is everybody can run the ball. Everybody's involved in running. So you talking about stamina, you talking about quickness and leg strength, all those good things, physicality, gonna have that. But as far as the technique of blocking, it's a long way to go. But you take a flyer with them in the 7th round. So interesting pick for the Eagles. Then we move on to the New York Giants, man. One of the linchpins in the draft, where at number 2, you take Saquon Barkley. And that was the whole question the whole time. It's like, what would the Giants do? Will they replace Eli Manning or get his replacement, whatever? I like the Giants draft. I would have thought about replacing Eli, not because of his age, because he hasn't been good. And like this whole thing of either we get Eli's replacement or we ride him to the playoffs. What? When's the last time Eli carried you to the playoffs? So that's my only question. I'm not exactly sure how that works out. So Saquon's a generational talent at back. From everything he has, running back is a physical trait position. From everything he has, you think he's a safe pick. So I'm not mad at that. It's just tough in a quarterback heavy class like this to pass him up. But then you back it up with one of my favorite guards who is like an inch behind Quentin Nelson, and that's Will Hernandez. I was hoping the Bears traded up and got him, but the Giants got him in the 2nd round, which is still, to me, I think he's a 1st round talent all day. You get Saquon, and this is an established line. I mean, you talk about Eric Flowers, quick feet, a lot of potential coming out. I like them, but potential. What's his first name? What's Rich Berg's first name? I think he came out of Colorado State, but the center. Smaller school potential. You talk about Pugh from Syracuse potential. Will Hernandez, even though it's a small school, this is one guy you feel like, no, he can come in day one and not have any problems ever. And so you got a guy that can open up holes for Saquon and trying to build this run game. in addition to the threat of OBJ, they're really trying to get the weapons to help Eli be as effective as possible. Then you get Lorenzo Carter in the third round, another steal. Again, a draft where edge rusher is scarce. I thought Lorenzo was really making his way up the boards, not only because of pass rush ability, but his ability to be a complete linebacker. Now, the question is, what will the Giants do defensively? Again, this is why I don't give grades. There's a lot of changeover. I don't know what the new schemes are in New York. They've always been an attacking 4-man front. If that's the case, I don't like Lorenzo Carter putting his hand in the ground. I think that's a waste of talent. Again, he's one of the more complete outside linebackers. You got a guy like Harold Landry who just rushed the pass, a glorified DN, but Lorenzo actually played linebacker. So if you're going to an odd front, he definitely fits. If you are still kind of with the scheme you had before, do you move him to a Sam linebacker and then blitz him on blitz packages? That's the question that remains to be seen, but I really like Lorenzo Carter as a kid, very hard worker. BJ Hill, NC State, way higher than I thought, but a solid guy. He reminds me when they got Jay Bromley out of Syracuse. Way earlier than I thought, but just kind of a stout, solid guy. Not sure he gives you much in terms of ceiling as a pass rusher, but stout in the run game that can help you out. Cal Lauletta, interesting. A lot of people were high on him, especially after the Senior Bowl. Didn't see it. I mean, you got Davis Webb or Webb Davis, whatever his name is. And so now you bring in another quarterback. I think that'll be interesting to see what he can do, but I wasn't real huge on him. RJ McIntosh, going to the 5th round was crazy to me. I thought 4th round all day, probably 3rd round. All potential. Nice frame, nice athleticism. I'm tweaking. It's been a long week. Nice athleticism, and I thought you could really mold him into something special. And so I thought teams would take a flyer on him, but 5th round, that's good value for him, especially again, Giants team that has been known for the D-line over these years. If you are going attacking 4-3, I think he could become a real devastating 3-tech and with a little bit of 1-tech in him because he's got a wide frame, but I like those picks overall. Lastly, we go to the Washington Redskins. Real cool draft over here, man. I mean, you get Deron Payne in the 1st round without hesitation. You put him next to Jonathan Allen, former teammate. I mean, you really talking about rock and rolling on that front. Because the coverage situation isn't as great. So I think they're trying to really put their chips on the front, either affecting the passer and stopping the run. So there's that. And then you get Darius Geis, the story of the whole draft, falling down because of the whatever happened to him. Geis, I don't value running backs high in general. Geis also just wasn't my number 4 back. I didn't see, I mean, people talk about his 2016 tape, but I evaluate this year. Whatever injuries you had, I evaluate this year. But I thought this year he was more decisive than 2016 as a north-south runner. I liked it. I don't think he gives you as much versatility, the jet sweeps and the slot receiver than he did in 2016, but at least he was more decisive. And so, Washington has typically been a heavy zone, and then you got Chris Thompson being your 3rd down back. So, interesting to see how they use guys, but I think he could be a bell cow in between the tackles, especially with that O-line they got in Washington. Jerron Christensen, speaking of O-line, I think they got 2 of the better bookends in the league with, your 2 tackles. But Christensen is a guy people were talking about 1st round, which was crazy. I see the potential, but definitely not the floor. Somebody, I guess an insurance policy maybe. You with Trent Williams, you get so much of the screen game and the different things you can do with his athleticism. I think Jerron Christensen in the same way could help you out in the run game. But he's definitely not a pass protector like Trent Williams is, and he's not a left tackle like he is. But maybe they feel like Morgan Moses just kind of slows down their scheme. Who knows? So interesting pick in the 3rd round. Troy Apke, a guy people were saying undrafted 7th round. This is a guy that I was really high on, and I was really hoping he did fall to 7th round and the Bears could get him. But look, tested off the charts, absolute freak test. But I thought his tape was better than people give him credit for, because no, he's not the best tackler, but he will hit people, and he isn't scared to come down in the run. He just has to get better with his angles and his wrap-up tackling. And then as far as the pass, you talking about 40+ inch vertical, dude will make plays on the ball in the back end. At least try. Now, is he a turnover machine? No, but he can jump out the gym, and he is very active. I think this is... I mean, Redskins and their safeties have been going back and forth for years. I mean, you finally get rid of Sua Cravens, even though I think he could have did something. So maybe this works out for them, but I think this is a good spot for Troy, where you could pick him up, not too much risk, and he could be, definitely, a high return for where you got him. Tim Settle, 1st round talent. I don't know, man. Honestly, I heard people were saying that in the combine they didn't like his movement, but watch the games. And I will say he's not like the traditional football player. He's not the football player type. He's not in love with the game. So, he's more so, I'm big and I'm doing it because I can. You need to get him focused. You need to get him right so he can keep his weight at a right place. He can continue to get better and not just rely on his size. But you can't deny watching him. Like, people talk about Vita Vea at 340 moving around. Look at Tim Settle at 340 moving around with better hand play than Vita Vea. Vita Vea will ragdoll people. He'll definitely be immovable. But when you're talking about just getting off a block quickly or a quick snap or shedding the block, Tim Settle's up there, man. He's absolutely up there. So I think it's a steal. People are looking at this as a depth pick. But I would not be at all shocked if he gets on the field early for the Washington Redskins. Then you get another Bama guy, former teammate of Jonathan Allen, Sean Dean Hamilton, hurt this year. Not Rashaan Evans level type, so people will probably have questions about what his ceiling might be, but I think a decent player. You can't go wrong with Bama. Greg Stroman, don't know much about him. And then Trey Quinn, Mr. Relevant, the other guy at SMU, opposite Cortland Sutton. Interesting pick, but a 7th round, take a flyer on that receiver. Trying to get another special teamer, I think, and then maybe an eventual weapon for Mr. Alex Smith. So not mad at this draft. Again, cornerback people thought might have been something you could go after, especially with the pretty good depth of cornerbacks that we had in this draft. Now, a lot of corners went earlier than expected, so instead of Geis, you could have talked about a number of guys, or even Jerron Christensen with your tackle situation. There's a number of corners in the 3rd, but can't be mad at this draft. I think they got some real solid football players. So anyway, that's my thoughts on the NFC East. Some of my favorite drafts and the whole thing, to be honest with you, but go to the comment section. Let me know what you thought about your team's draft. Thumbs up, subscribe, share it around, get the convo started, and thank you for listening.